Good evening. Welcome to Paranormal Experienced with Kat Hobson. That's me. I am so glad that you're here tonight, and I hope that you are getting prepared for a really wonderful holiday season. We say Merry Christmas at our house, but whatever you celebrate, I hope it's so special for you, and I hope that you're enjoying the time too. Um, I am really excited about tonight's show. This is someone that I actually met at Scarefest eons ago and had a moment to talk with him, and he was so covered up, I'm sure he doesn't even remember that. But I have wanted to host him. I am really excited that he's here. This is Richard Estep. He is a prolific author. He has written all types of books about haunted locations. And what I like is he put in his bio, he goes and investigates them and writes about them so that we can experience that too. And he has covered everything. Fox Hollow Farm, uh, the the book that he has newly out is In Search of Demons. He has A Nightmare in Velasca. Um, Haunted Healthcare. He has been on so many shows. I think that that's one of the things that gets people's interest in him so much because he's out there and you can see him and you can see the experiences that he shares on television. He's been on Haunted Case Files, Haunted Hospitals, Paranormal 911. That's not even close to being many of them. But let's bring Richard on. Hi.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, Kat. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I am so glad that you're here. I've wanted to do this for some time, and it took a little planning and some time to get you in because of your schedule, not mine. I would have like, oh yes, now. But I'm so glad to have you on.
It's a pleasure to be here, Kat. Thank you.
We were talking a little bit before the show. The stuff that you do as for a living as a paramedic, and you also are an instructor. That's a very special field. You you have to be a bit of a warrior, but still able to be calm, cool, and collected. Have you done that all your life?
Have I done?
The paramedic work.
No. I became a firefighter in 2001. I signed up for the fire service on 9/11, and in the US, you have to become an EMT in order to serve as a firefighter on most departments. So I did that. It wasn't something I really thought was interesting, but I found firstly I found out how much fire the fire department actually doesn't do,
Yeah.
thanks to fire suppression systems and things like that. We live in a relatively safer world, but the fire department does a lot of medicine. And
Yes.
so I soon found that I really enjoyed helping people that were having maybe the worst day they were ever going to have. And I continued to climb that ladder, no pun intended, eventually going on to become a paramedic. And here I am.
Well, I think that that is one of the most heroic jobs anyone can have. I have a lot of people around me that are in emergency management, and it takes a special person to be able to be calm, cool, collected, get through. Um, you were on haunted hospitals, we mentioned, and a friend of mine who was also on that show is a cardiac cath lab person,
Oh, yeah.
and that is such. It's really interesting how many people that work in any form of medicine have so many paranormal experiences, and they do see so much. It's um, it's just an interesting thing because, especially in what you do with EMS paramedic services, you have people in crisis, or you wouldn't be there. Have you
That's,
have you
yeah,
had
sorry.
things happen with that
Uh, do you mean paranormal things?
paranormal things?
No.
Not
But
at all.
no. Number one, I'm not someone that classes myself as a sensitive or anything along those lines. But number two, I owe it to every patient and their family to have my focus 100% on them and their emergency. So I've said this before, but you could parade a troop full of headless horsemen through my 911 scene. and I'm thinking about what's going to kill my patient next.
Yep.
How are things going? Do I like the way their vital signs are trending? What am I going to do if things get worse? Things like that. So my focus needs to be on the patient. So that's as it should be.
That is as it should be. I actually didn't mean, were you looking for paranormal encounters while you were caring, but rather I guess I meant more along the lines of, did your patients have paranormal
Oh,
things happen?
not that I'm aware of. I mean, it's only one time that I can recall was kind of an awkward moment when a patient's significant other recognized me from TV from haunted hospitals
Oh,
on a 911 scene, and that was quite jarring, and proceeded to tell me that they had a haunted house and things of that nature. But beyond that, I think that a lot of my interactions with the medical and the paranormal kind of happen more because I tend to attract those kind of stories.
mhm.
Whenever the tagline for our show, Haunted Hospitals, is every nurse has a ghost story, and I really do think that's true, or it's so close to being true. And as you pointed out, so do others, not just nurses. Um, Spend enough time in the hospital, and strange things will happen, or you'll notice that strange things are happening. So you can talk with anybody from the cleaning staff, who are absolute heroes,
Yeah,
by the way,
they are.
all the way up to the head of the hospital in some cases. I talked to a top oncology physician in the UK, for example, that experienced an encounter with a phantom nurse that is widely believed to be the spirit of Florence Nightingale, who is the mother of nursing, the
Mhm.
profession, or one of them anyway. So they do kind of stack their care at all levels, I think, in healthcare, to patients and to providers alike. Um, and I don't think there's any signs of that slowing down.
Well, I think a lot of that has, well, there's various reasons. I think a lot of it has to do that if you are in a trauma situation as a, a patient
Hmm.
or someone who loves that patient, the energy levels are so high, the
Hmm.
emotions are so high
Yeah.
that it can really overwhelm. And I think that energy can help manifest things or help things manifest. But I also, I mentioned my other friend who was on haunted hospitals as well. And he was there. He's a cath lab nurse, but in his case, he was there with a child who had drowned. And he he experienced her, leaving with someone, and he just screamed for her, and she resuscitated. It was a lot more than that, but that's the basic gist. And he is the most no nonsense person I know. I mean,
Hmm.
he's a brilliant nurse. He is just a great paranormal investigator. He is also the best drone operator I know too. He's brilliant. But it's just so cool. I
Yeah.
mean, for video and such. But I don't know. It just always never fails to amaze me where people have experiences, why they have experiences, and I just think it's interesting. I love when I get a chance to talk with people
Yeah.
who who are involved sometimes in some of people's worst moments. And because I do think that the energy can help things to happen as well as healing. I mean, prayer works a lot. So it doesn't work a lot too, but it works a lot. So thanks for entertaining that. I just think it's cool. Hello, Jeremy. We have Jeremy in chat too. But I am really interested. You joined after 9/11, and I think that's a pretty heroic thing to have done.
Um,
Because
Go ahead.
now I was just going to say, how long have you lived in America?
I came to the US in 1999, uh, and it's very nice of you to say that. I think that, and I think a lot of people that work in my field, um, a lot of us think that the term hero is overused. I
I
certainly do.
know.
If you were to ask me who I find heroic, it's not 911 providers or people like that. Um, it's not even the military, which might sound controversial, but a very wise individual once said that making the decision to enter a service career is a heroic act, and then everything that happens after you sign on that line is the job, it's the duty.
I
Um,
agree with that.
I think the most heroic people I've ever encountered are those that are fighting quiet battles. Um, to give you an example, the many, many families across this country and others that are caring for a loved one at home that
Mhm.
is afflicted with dementia,
Yes.
that is dealing with such a cruel disease day in, day out, often with limited help, let alone recognition. Um, and they do this for years, if not decades, sometimes at a terrible emotional cost to themselves. So those are the people that I find really heroic, and I love making that point whenever I can.
Well,
Um,
I appreciate that because my mom passed away a couple of years ago from complications of Alzheimer's. And she had been in an assisted living facility. And when it was time to, she had to go to the hospital in that interim period. And I didn't know where
yeah,
we were going to go from there because I was the only person taking care of her. The person that was supposed to, who had power of attorney and such, had just disappeared out of the scene.
mm,
And so we, the administrator at the residential home that she had chosen, it was it was just regular living, retirement living. Um, and she had been moved to an Alzheimer care unit there.
mhm,
And that woman is who, when I was like, I don't know, how do I find a hospice? They're telling me we need hospice. I don't know where I'm going to take her. And she said, well, she can go back into her original apartment and her same roommate is still there, but her suite's available and we can have hospice there. I had no idea, right? And so she got to be in a comfortable place that she was familiar with. And it was during COVID. She had been in the hospital without food for 10 days. Nobody was allowed to go in. And she was a have to feed them person. And nobody did. When I walked in, there were trays of food sitting everywhere. They had left the food in there with somebody that they were starving. It was terrible.
that is
Um,
awful.
but I would agree because those people that helped me through that, they were heroes. They were absolutely the kind of people that you want in your corner when you have something like that. And I would say that the people that care for people with dementia and care for the families and help you get through what is a really prolonged experience because a lot of times those people are physically healthy and nothing else works.
Mm.
And it's so hard for them that the people that help with that are pretty heroic.
Yeah,
So,
I really look up to those people that they lead these lives of um, quiet, unheralded. Every
yes.
day they dig down and they find the courage to go on in the face of one of the cruelest afflictions that is out there. Dementia robs one of their self. It's
Yeah.
absolutely awful. Uh, of course, there are other conditions. I'm singling out dementia, but anybody that has a loved one with a long-term illness and that is a caregiver for them, those are the people I doff my hat to
I
and
do
have so
too.
much respect for, not least because they never signed up for it. And, people like me get to go home and we get to take off our uniforms and we get away
Yeah.
from it. They can't. They live with it, and it's a 24/7 commitment that they, most of the time, never asked for. But they are wonderful people that honor that commitment to their loved ones. So true heroism there, I think.
Well, I agree, but I still give a lot of credit to the people that help with that. Not every I was very fortunate in that that woman decided to help me find the right way to do that. And
Mm.
she is who was brilliant. So my husband was brilliant too. So the people that support those caregivers are pretty amazing too. But enough about that. So um, I want to let people know that they can email you also at richard@richardastup.net, right?
Yes,
So if you have questions or anything, we're going to put that in chat too. So there's that. But we're going to change the topic if that's okay with you.
absolutely, by all means.
Okay, thanks. Um, I have gone through several of your books, and I did not realize you were quite so prolific when I started reading, and I love that because I read fast generally. So there's plenty of for me to get through, but I know that you have spent time at Ashmore.
Oh yeah, Ashmore Estates.
Yeah, I love Robin Terry. He is one of the best men I know. Period.
He's very busy right now. I know that he and Mrs. Claus have to get the reindeer loaded.
Yeah,
He is the Santa Claus of the paranormal, right? You never see Robin and Santa Claus
yeah,
in the same place at the same time. But he's also, in all seriousness, such a generous and big-hearted man. The number of times I've seen him donate Ashmore Estates for a charity event
yeah.
or pitch in when somebody needed help. So he's one of those people I love
Or
that he's
gift
in
of
the paranormal
facility.
field. Yeah, yeah,
I
such a
mean,
great soul.
he is a great soul. And I was fortunate enough he came to Birmingham to investigate a location here with some
Mm,
people. And we had the opportunity to have breakfast that morning. And it was just such a gift. That's the first time I got to really spend time with him.
yeah.
And because we had met previously at Scarefest. And I think he's a pretty good Santa in real
He is.
life.
And he also volunteers for his local fire department as well.
He does.
Yeah, there is no slowing that man down.
Nope.
Um, Love Robin, yeah. And Ashmore Estates is such a great location. Um,
Yes.
I've always enjoyed my time there, and I love the way that it's being preserved for future generations to appreciate.
I've only been able to go, it's a long ride for me. And
Mm,
I've only been able to investigate there twice. And it was really cool.
mm,
I went for an event there several years ago and then um, got to actually go with some friends and investigate. And I had
mhm.
just gotten one of those little um, round devices. It's like a puck kind of a
Right.
thing. It has the little prongs off of it.
Hmm.
And I set it in the floor. I didn't know what it would do.
Hmm.
And I had just tossed it down. And I was like, if you walk, and I did a demonstration. I just walked around and said, if you just want to walk around, it'll do this. And if you don't want to, that's fine. I'm just
Hmm.
glad to be here. And it did a slow walk around it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, look at you. People are like, you're always cheering the ghosts on. I'm like, well, they're doing me a favor. I appreciate that. Yes, I am. I do say thank you. So, and I am kind of a cheerleader in the first place. So, woo. But for the paranormal. But what is this is crazy to ask this because you've been everywhere. You've done all kinds of things. But do you have outside of Ashmore, do you have a favorite location that you've just enjoyed the experience so much that you just love going there?
Yeah, for me, it's Asylum 49 in Utah, a former hospital that is now a full contact Halloween haunted house attraction.
Mhm.
Um, and that's great, but I mean, I've investigated and I love numerous haunted hospitals. Old South Pittsburgh in Tennessee is one of my
Love old South Pittsburgh.
absolute favorites. Harriman Hospital is new to us, but
Yes.
I love Harriman. Who could say no to Waverly Hills? But the special thing about Asylum 49 is that there is a cast of haunters, most of them children, many of them anyway, and they come together as a family each year to put on this haunted house, and they band together, and it gives the children in that town somewhere very positive to go, to exercise their creative side, to be in a positive environment with where they are supported, because I think much like me at their age, which is my goodness, half a century ago nearly, but they are not the cool kids or anything like that. These are the kids that maybe don't fit in most places, and they fit in there. So um, I'm honored to be part of their family, and I love going back to Asylum 49. I was just there this past Halloween, in fact, and had a terrific time scaring the living and investigating the dead.
Yes. Is it very active from the
If
paranormal
you,
side?
it's funny, if you go in March or April, let's say, no. But if you go in September, October, in the run up to Halloween, you have customers coming through several nights a week. They're all coming through with the intent of getting scared. That's why you go to a haunted attraction.
Sure.
And I truly do believe that the energy that comes with that fear, even though it's the kind of fear where you know you're safe,
Hmm.
in the same way that the fear of watching a really well done scary movie, you know you're safe, right? Or riding a roller coaster, but still you get those moments of fear if
Yeah.
they do their job right, and they do their job right. I do believe that the spirits of that location are able to use the energy of that fear in order to help manifest.
Which just makes it that much more fun. When you say full contact,
Hmm.
is that because they touch?
Yeah, you sign a waiver to go in, and
Mhm.
you can choose your level. So if you are full contact, you are given a special neck bracelet which says, "Hey, you're fair game," and they will put you on tables. They will squirt you with icy cold water and all kinds of other creepy things that I won't spoil here in case some of your viewers or listeners get to visit. But
Yes.
yeah, and you can stop it at any time by taking that necklace off. But once it's off, you're done.
That is so cool. I volunteered at a haunted house and we touched. And when I wasn't in costume, when I was working the gate or whatever,
Hmm.
um, people were all, yeah, well, we're not going to touch. I said, oh, we do touch.
Hmm.
And like the biggest, burliest, bravest men were like, what? It's so much fun because that's what feeds the energy. Like you were saying,
Yeah. And
you
I've
know,
watched 12-year-old girls terrify men twice their age and three times their size. They are made up to look like the nurses from hell. And I've seen them just wag a finger at these huge guys, and these tough men, their bowels turn to ice water. It's really funny to
yes,
watch.
I love that. The worst part was I was in a scene and I was the character in the scene and I looked gory, bloody, god awful, and all the kids were coming through and they were like, "Hey, Miss Hobson, look, it's Miss Hobson," and I'm like, "What do I look like during the day?" you know. But yeah, it was only the kids recognized me. Grown-ups didn't. So I don't know, maybe they read energy better than grown-ups do. I don't know what it was, but it was kind of upsetting. So, you know, you have been you have written so many books and I am I am in the process of reading through them. I Do you write about just places that you've been?
Well, when I write a location-based book, primarily it centers around an investigation I've done there. Because some of my favorite reader emails, people will tell me, "Hey, I live in England, I live in Australia, wherever it might be, and I'm probably never going to get to Ashmore Estates, let's say, but I really felt as though I was with you on the trip. You described it, you told me what it was like. I felt like I was sitting with you in those dark hallways." and I really take those kind of comments to heart. So, on a location-based book, yeah, it's somewhere I've investigated, and I'm trying to paint that picture for the reader. But I also have written a number of books, and will continue to write books about cases I find fascinating that I've
Hmm.
not visited or have yet to visit. I mean, for example, I have some fairly strong opinions about the haunting of, say, the White House, the Amityville case, things of that nature. So it's important to acknowledge that just my opinion. And I do enjoy kind of dissecting those cases a little bit. And
You're pretty good at that.
well, I do appreciate that. Thanks very much. I've just finished writing about the most haunted house in England, as it was titled, Borley Rectory, which sadly has burned down a long time ago. But I find that case fascinating, and you can make a strong case for much of that haunting being a hoax, but you can't dismiss it all. And that's what fascinates me. So it's not a case of is it haunted, is it not, but more where was that line drawn? Where did we see human beings kind of helping the haunting out, as it were? I find that fascinating. And today I've been writing about the haunting that arose from the crash of the R-101 airship, um, the huge Zeppelin that crashed in France in 1930 and killed 40, I want to say 48 people, um, who then supposedly came through and spoke to a psychic medium and described to her in detail exactly why the airship crashed. So those cases fascinate me, and I like to write a mix of books of types.
Well, it's I love locations
Hmm.
because I'm in Alabama. I do not, and I do. I mean, I spent time in Scotland this year investigating, and we went to so many places that sometimes I forgot what town I was in the next morning, which was great. I'm not
Yeah,
complaining about that at all. But it was really, it's fun to read about some place that you don't know if you're actually ever going to get there.
right.
And I just, I find that just delightful, especially when it's well written and you do write well. So it doesn't seem formulaic. So it just seems fun.
Well, thank
So
you. I know that a lot of these cases are covered on TV shows, but I think that television is kind of a different beast. Although you can more visually see what's going on. Depending on the show, you always wonder how much is being played up for dramatic effect.
yes,
Um, and I think also TV productions or even YouTube videos are kind of constrained by the format that they're in, and they don't really have the luxury that I have of trying to convey with words
hmm,
what it smells like, what it feels like inside that particular location, what it's like to just have those hackles going up on the back of your neck, those kind of things. So that's why I like prose. It's my preferred medium.
well, I think that it's much easier to get your opinion across and your experience across. And April has a question in chat, and and by the way, hi April. But
Hey,
she wants
April.
to know: is there something that you find similar for behavior in every single location?
Like a consistent fact. I,
Consistent.
I let's see. Um, I'm wary of saying that anything is consistent across all locations. I think that all and every are very definitive kind of final terms. So I don't know about everyone, but I would say that most of them. Um, let's see. It's a really good question. I've never been asked that one before, which is why I like it.
Yes, she's a outside the box thinker too.
Definitely. I don't know that there is a commonality that crosses all of those locations, April. I think that some things are more common than others. Anybody that gets EVPs, for example, it's like the paranormal investigators bingo card. You haven't lived until you've gotten an EVP that says "get out" at least one location,
That's true.
and I suspect we owe a lot of that to the movie version of Amityville Horror, where you have that classic scene, the priest played by I think it's Rod Steiger,
Yeah.
and you hear that growled kind of "get out," which supposedly never happened in Amityville, but now, so many of us get that, and we kind of are biased by, oh, it's something dark, it's something negative. I almost wonder if the ghosts don't see paranormal investigators as unwelcome house guests, and what they really mean is, oh, get out,
I know,
let me
right?
have some peace and quiet. I
Well,
don't know that it's nearly as sinister as we would think.
I think you feel like it's sinister regardless because somebody that you can't see
Hmm.
is telling you to do something you don't want to do. So,
Fair, but we're the ones that are. It reminds me of the situation we have when you hear about bears roaming neighborhoods,
yes.
and it's like we're the ones that are encroaching on your habitat.
Mhm.
The location is their turf. They are there. They have a better claim to be there than we do. They were almost certainly there before us, and they'll probably be there afterwards. And we're the ones coming in, and we're demanding that they show themselves and answer our questions. Who do we think we are?
I
And
know, right?
I think
I agree.
yeah, that speaks to attitude, the attitude that you approach with. It's
Yes,
why I don't like provocation. I think as a golden rule, you should behave in a haunted location as you would behave as a guest in somebody else's house.
absolutely. I
And
agree.
I have made exceptions. You mentioned my book on Fox Hollow Farm, and you mentioned Robin Terry. Robin has the ghost of John Wayne Gacy in his house,
Yes,
or at least something that very much acts like it. Fox Hollow Farm is haunted by what may be the spirit of Herb Baumeister, the serial killer. I don't feel particularly compelled to be nice to anybody who behaves like that.
yes,
So that's different. But that aside, I think that you can't go wrong being respectful. And again, how would you act if you were invited into a stranger's home? Do that, which includes not outstaying your welcome as well.
yes.
House guests are like fish, as the old saying goes. They begin to smell after 3 days.
Absolutely. I have experienced that. I think I have caused people to experience that too.
I think
But
we all have, yeah.
probably, yeah,
But how obnoxious is it when you see people going in and making demands? Certain TV shows, of course, really kick that off. Um,
indeed.
and it has become a thing on TikTok and YouTube, but by no means all creators do that. There are
Mhm.
there are plenty of ethical, respectful creators out there, and those are the ones that have my support.
Yes. One of the things that I'm going to share this because it was so funny.
Okay.
And we were at Bannockburn House in
Mhm.
Scotland. And my research partner, travel buddy, all the stuff, always says wherever we get, and I've told her, don't do that. But so we walk in and she says, does anyone here recognize my energy? And I was like, you don't need to ask that. Do you know how many people have lived here? And so come to find out, um, she had murdered someone in a past life and they recognized her. And it was so off the chain weird. And
Yeah.
when we got out of there, I was like, don't ask that anymore. Don't ask that anymore. Because, she was like, that was a past life. That was not who I am now. And I'm so sorry. Will you please forgive me? And it was like, nope. With the rods, nope, nope, nope,
Oh,
nope. I mean, no matter how she phrased it, because she wasn't leaving without being forgiven, and they
yeah.
weren't forgiving her. And I'm just like, better just to walk away
Right. There's
before this
apparently no
escalated.
statute of limitations on murder between lives. Then is what I'm
I
hearing.
know, right? What That's a good question. Apparently it had not, been met yet for
Mm,
the individual. But that's an extraordinarily old home.
yeah.
It's beautiful, but it's being redone. It's being loved on. And
Good.
so I know, right? I love to see historic places like that be loved
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. The preservation of those kind of places for future generations is wonderful.
Yeah. Well, the National Trust is a really good thing. I
Hmm.
wish we had something a little bit more active like that here. But
What the US does better than I think any other country I've ever been to is preserve its battlefields. Um,
yes.
Having recently been to Antietam for the first time, um, you can really appreciate Civil War battlefields here in the US and um, Revolutionary War or War of Independence battlefields too.
Hmm.
I think the US does a great job of not just preserving them, but also for the people that come and walk that ground, you can gain a new appreciation of their importance in our national history.
Well, I agree. My husband, who is not into the paranormal, was making a purchase in Tennessee,
Hmm.
and we went to Stone River Battleground. And it was my first time outside of Gettysburg to be
Mm,
on a battlefield.
right.
And it was even I mean, I was doing an investigation. I had recorders I was setting up, and he was like, "Do you want me to take that one over here so you can triangulate the sound?" And I'm like, "Yes, thank you." you know, but there's just something about them that is so spiritual. And
Stones River. I'm jealous because it's been on my list forever. As much as I've been to Tennessee, I've never gotten there. I've driven past it
mhm,
maddeningly, but I was always on my way to catch a flight.
well, I I'm going to tell you, go.
Oh, I shall.
I mean, it's very disconcerting because they have like shadow cutout figures,
Hmm.
holding muskets or whatever,
Hmm.
like stationed around places. And the first
Yeah.
time that you're not paying attention and turn around and you see one, it's like, whoa. But it's very active, and it's very special. I've had people who lived on the other side of Chickamauga battlefield
Hmm.
tell me that on their way home there was a regiment crossing the road, and they stopped, and the people coming the other way stopped also.
Yeah.
And so there were more than one experiencer, and that they just sat there and watched this Confederate battle regiment cross the road. And when it was gone, they just kind of waved to each other as they drove on, and just couldn't believe it. And I cannot even imagine having that experience. I think that would be the coolest thing ever. One of them.
Yeah,
So,
to see history literally replaying itself really
yeah, right in
really
front
would
of
be
you.
remarkable. I always feel there's something about US Civil War battlefields that the past just feels closer.
Yes.
And it might be because there's never a shortage of reenactors. As you know, whenever you walk around Gettysburg, you see
Mhm.
reenactors, there is an overriding temptation to just reach out and make sure they're solid.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. I agree with
but
that.
but I think it just feels as if you could you could close your eyes and be there on that day in 1863 or 1862, whatever the day of the battle is. It feels as if yesteryear is so close
Mhm.
you could reach out and touch it.
I agree. I go, I love the Gettysburg Battlefield Bash, and it's one of my favorite events anywhere. I think that I went to a restaurant, I think it was the Dobbs House,
The
and it's
Dobbin
in
House,
Dobbins, thank you.
Dobbin House, yeah.
And that place is someplace that even some of the people working there, you just want to go, hello. And it
Mm.
just feels like there's people there when there's no one around you.
And I approached the owner of the Dobbin House by email because I'd written a couple of books about Gettysburg haunted inns, and I wanted to make it a trilogy. And I love
Oh,
the Dobbin House, so I wrote and
okay.
asked about it, and I was told in no uncertain terms, "We don't have any ghosts here."
Yes, they
And I'm like,
do.
"Well,
Yes, they do.
you're certainly entitled to your opinion about your place, but I would be shocked if that was true."
I I do not believe that to be true. I'm
No,
just going to leave it at that. But
yeah, I mean, your
yeah,
house, your rules, but I find that hard to believe.
yeah. And Ah, and Allie, who might or might not be my child, says, "Have you ever explored Charleston?"
No, that's is that North Carolina or
South,
South Carolina?
South
I'm
Carolina.
getting my Carolinas mixed up.
It's
Uh,
easy.
I've I've never been to Charleston, um, but it's on a very long list of stuff that I would like to investigate. Um, one project, I guess I can like break this news here, but
Cool.
one project that I'm contracted for to write next year is a history of the United States, but told through hauntings.
Oh gosh.
So I will kind of begin in the 18th century and kind of go through a chronological timeline to today with that lens of hauntings and paranormal cases being the spine of the book. So I cannot think of a better excuse to get out to a place like Charleston than to work on a book like that.
Blackbeard's house would
Mm,
be fun. And I'm going to tell you, if you go to Charleston, I will meet you there and investigate with you because I I want to do that so badly there. There's when I went to go see her, we went to a restaurant called Trinity. Allie, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't you say the name had changed? But this place was an old church that had been made into a restaurant. And
right.
when you walked in, hey, it was really cool because they had like sayings written in chalk on the, I
Yeah.
guess, in paint on the ceiling all the way through the, the gabled ceilings and stuff. But it was so energetic. And we went through what's similar to the New Orleans French market, but they have a market in Charleston set up the same way. And that area felt cool. And we
Hmm.
did actually go into a place that was haunted and was active. You could feel them. And it's come to find out it's actually known to be haunted. So that was fun. And Church and Union was um, written with Art of War. So that was amazing. But Allie, if you could put the name of that bar, the bourbon bar that we went to at the top of that house, so that he can have that too if he decides to go there and look. But it was so, so cool. And I'm going to jump up here and chat. Lori Dorsey, who is my research partner and
Hmm.
partner in crime, said, "Please and thank you goes a long way, even at Mansfield." She gets everything. She does. She's the best. She's a brilliant SLS operator.
Hmm.
She is good with EVP, but it's really interesting because we would go to Mansfield for her birthday. She would do a birthday party there. And have you investigated at Mansfield?
No,
Never?
never visited.
Well, Lori, you should send an invitation and let's go do that with him. But I won't make you pay. I will pay. But it's just so she gets all this activity no matter where we go. When we were in, she's the one that the spirit told her that you murdered me,
Hmm.
and no, you're not forgiven. So that was fun. And the name of that place that was haunted, that you could actually be aware of the activity around you, was Harry's on the Market.
Okay.
And it's a multi-story place. There's a restaurant in the bottom, and then you go upstairs to the different bars and stuff. But yeah, I will I will write that down and send that to you because if you go there, that is someplace that I feel fairly confident that you're going to get activity.
Okay. I should
So,
definitely look into that. Thank you.
but so how many locations do you plan to include with that experience with that book?
Sorry, ooh, I knocked my iPad. So right now, I have just I'm finishing a book for the same publisher on great hauntings. So all I've done is sign the contract to do the history book. I haven't specifically divvied up the number of locations yet, but I never pitch a book without it having form and structure in my mind.
Hmm.
So I would envision being about 30, maybe, yeah, 30 is a decent number of locations, I think, for a book like that. But if it needs more, I can do that. Or if I feel like I'm wanting to delve into a higher word count for one location and then another, I have the latitude to do that as well. So.
That would be so much fun. I just think I think you've got the best job. I really do because I love investigating, but I love sharing them too.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I enjoy telling those stories, and I don't think that what I do is that difficult. I just sit down and do it, and I do it consistently and repeatedly. That's the main reason I have 34 books out with more in the pipeline. Um, it definitely requires a discipline to do,
mhm,
but
yes,
if you're passionate about it, it doesn't feel like work. And I think that's true of most endeavors in life. You know, if you find fulfillment in a thing, um, and you love the process of doing it, then it
yes.
doesn't feel like a job at all.
I have I have many friends who write, and one of them in Scotland is known as the Haunted Explorer, and his books, he's prolific as well, but not quite so many as you. He's playing catch up on that. But it's really interesting because I love learning. You provide such a, a gift and so much fun because not everybody can get out.
Hmm.
Not everybody can go and explore places that are far away, for sure. And not everybody's comfortable going on their own to investigate. You just provide a gift, really, I think, because people get to go with you. And that's
Oh,
pretty
thank you.
cool.
I also, because I'm not beholden to anybody, for the most part, I get to tell the unvarnished version of the story as I see it. Not
Mhm.
naming any names, but there are locations out there that have been purchased by
Yes.
individuals who have a vested interest in dramatizing, overly
Yeah.
dramatizing the story. Some of them are actively dancing on the graves of people who have died in terms of the way they're
Yes.
marketing it. Um,
Yes.
and I'm very, very glad that I get the opportunity to tell the story my way, because my objective is not to make money. Um, it's nice that people want to buy my books, and I appreciate it. But as I love telling people that are aspiring writers, you know, my first book deal was six figures, and no one told me there'd be a decimal point. Like by the time
I
you put
love that.
in, yeah, by
I'm
the
sorry.
time
I think
you
that's clever.
I want expectations to be realistic. Like by the time you add up travel costs, equipment costs, time from work, things like that,
Hmm.
um, it nobody gets rich writing paranormal books. And so, you know, you tell the story because you're passionate about doing it. Um, and I've seen just such garbage written about certain locations. Um,
Yes.
I've seen it on television shows. I've seen it on YouTube clips, you know, and um, it is just a tidal wave of misinformation about certain places, all of it cynically calculated to garner views, clicks, likes, and therefore money.
Yeah.
Um, I could care less. I stand behind what I write, and don't get me wrong, I've made mistakes, and I'm definitely open to correction when new facts come to light. I'm definitely happy to say, you know, here's the way things are now. But I think telling the unvarnished, unsensationalized, sometimes frankly boring reality of what we do,
Yeah.
um, I like that. And enough people like reading about it that I'm pretty happy.
Well, it's really funny because it can be so boring. It really can. You
Well,
know,
it's a lot like 911 work in that you spend 90% of the time waiting for the exciting 10% to happen.
yeah.
Much of a paramedic's training or a firefighter's training, um, much of it is devoted to the 10% of the time when lives really are at stake.
Yes.
90% of the time, um, we are taking somebody from point A to point B. And there are entire shifts when the most important thing I do is hold somebody's hand,
Yeah.
which I'm not belittling that. You know, you can change somebody's world if they're having a bad day with just a little human contact, like holding their hand. But
Yes.
you know, the reason that we all picked this profession is that we want to make a positive impact on people's lives. There's a lot of waiting. There's a lot of nothing happening. There's a lot of training to prepare for that 10%. And I think in the paranormal field, it's the same thing. You are going to sit in a lot of hallways, getting very bored and cold
Yes.
in the near dark, you know, with literally nothing happening. And when that genuine paranormal experience
Yes.
happens, it's worth it. That's the payoff.
Absolutely. You
Yeah.
know, it's so funny because it is boring. It can be so boring. You better be there with somebody you don't mind spending time with because, you know, if you're not by yourself, and I don't like doing it by myself, I'd much rather have somebody to talk to.
Yeah,
And
just for safety reasons, I don't advocate investigating alone.
absolutely. And well, no. I- Sometimes there can be people that you don't know are in there, which is always disconcerting.
Mm.
Um, April has another great comment, and I agree with this. And she says, I think there are many military locations that are haunted and not researched or investigated because they are not open to the public. And she wonders how much history is missing in those places.
Yeah, there are. I mean, I
Yeah.
was fortunate enough, maybe 15 years ago, to investigate just the residence at Fort Warren in Wyoming. Fort Warren is where a lot of the US's ICBMs, nuclear missiles,
Okay.
are operated from. And it used to be a cavalry base. Now it is an Air Force base. And what fascinates me is that if you talk to the MPs at Fort Warren, several of them have stories about driving between missile silos in Humvees, and they will see the spirits of native warriors riding across the prairie and then disappearing. Now, in order to be allowed to work with nuclear missiles, you undergo pretty rigorous psychological testing. You do not get to be imaginative and fanciful. In other words, the kind of people that say they see ghosts generally don't get that job. So
Right.
when the MPs tell those kind of stories, I find that really credible.
I would
And
agree. Yeah.
yeah, but then you look at the history of the base as a cavalry fort, and you realize that yes, so much of the paranormal activity on that base, and there are several historic buildings that have ghost stories at Fort Warren. So much of it, I think, can be traced back to the days when cavalry squadrons lived and operated out of Fort Warren.
That's really cool. I love when I love when you get a credible witness that you really can't, it's nice. You just, if you can't impeach them, I think that's just brilliant.
Yeah, when they have a security clearance, uh,
Yes. Yes.
that's pretty telling.
And, that level of clearance,
Mhm.
you know, like you said, they've been through the ringer on that. So,
Yeah, I wrote when I wrote my first book on UFOs. Um, I interviewed an airline pilot that had an encounter with something unusual in the skies, and he because it was not talked about back then, it was
yeah.
frowned upon. Your career prospects would suffer if you were the sort of person that saw flying saucers and little green men. He actually went and got an independent psychological evaluation and was very proud of the fact that, in his words, he was certified sane in order to keep his job.
Oh, wow. That is something that people don't realize, unless you're in Chicago and that one came down over Chicago, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah,
Nobody would question that. But April said that her husband was on the Cole and Eisenhower and heard stories on there. I'm sure, especially on the Eisenhower. So
I can't talk too much about it, but I am one of the books that I will be writing next year. I'm contracted to write a book which will involve a military UFO UAP connection. So mm,
interesting.
It seems quite timely at the moment, doesn't it?
Well, it does. I'm actually doing a show Sunday on drones, on these drones,
Hmm.
but there is so much connection.
Hmm.
And I don't know. I work for a company that sold esprit de corps items for the military, and it was a lot of fun because I got to talk to like the chief of boats and stuff like that. It's really interesting when a submariner has a story because that's rare.
It has
I
real
would think,
depth as well, doesn't it?
yeah, and it's really interesting. I hear a lot, or I used to hear a lot about activity in the Indian Ocean
Oh,
and
interesting.
USOs and UFOs were rampant there.
And they're the
And
same thing. It just varies with altitude.
yes, absolutely they do. One of the smartest, most professional people I know was testing equipment on one, and there was a fast mover, and that was the term used.
Hmm.
And that blew me away because this person is not prone to fancy. And it was like, that's so cool. What did you do? He said, I was told that there was nothing there. So I wasn't even supposed to be looking at it.
Mm.
So that was an interesting moment in time too. I just, I love because I host here, I also host Fate Magazine Radio, and people share the most bizarre experiences. And I'm absolutely certain that you get a whole lot of that just because people respect you and your work and they find you fascinating and they want to know what you think about things.
I I do love hearing people's experiences, um, and I'm surprised how often I find sometimes some pretty bizarre stories to be very credible. I particularly find it impressive when the witness doesn't want any kind of fame. They're
Hmm.
not looking to get their 15 minutes. They don't want their name to be mentioned. Um, they just want to share this thing that's happened to them and have somebody tell them that I'll use their term, not mine, that they're not crazy,
Yes.
as they will say to me frequently. That's not a word I would regularly use, but that's really what they want, and there is a real relief for them knowing that other individuals have experienced something similar. I just finished co-authoring a book on Mothman with the researcher Tobias Wayland, and you know the number of witnesses that we spoke to who had these most bizarre experiences weren't trying to get famous. They were just puzzled as to what happened. They wanted to understand it. They wanted understanding, and it happens, I think, more often than we realize.
Mothman, creatures.
Well, well, I mean, actually, just genuinely high strangeness type phenomena. Mothman is just one facet.
Yeah.
Flying humanoids seem to be everywhere. Um,
Isn't that odd? I
yeah,
mean,
it really is.
I think it is because you would think there would be more reporting of that, although there is reporting, but you would think that it would become more of um, a public awareness factor. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of that. It's like that creature in Chicago for so long.
We were in Chicago investigating Mothman sightings out there, actually,
Mhm.
um, and again, multiple witnesses reporting very similar things. Uh, Strange things that just seem to defy explanation. So I think the world is a stranger place than we ever give it credit for.
Well, that's good because we're usually a lot stranger than we get credit for, too.
Mm,
So
ideally.
that's the plan. But what is the, I'm a little afraid to ask you this because, you know, I know how many things you hear,
Mhm.
but what is the most unexpected or unusual? experience that's been shared with you, and you don't have to share details or at all, but just enough to, what is strange to you?
What is the strangest experience that I've had?
No, that was
Mm.
shared to you.
Oh yeah, yeah, that I've encountered. I get it. I'm racking my brains to go through there are just so
A
many.
few, right?
There are, and so strangest. I don't know that I would even want to put a label on it. Because so much of it, when you look at the literature, and especially if you review this stuff going back to the late 1800s and the early days of the Society for Psychical Research, um, say you have an encounter with a dead relative, um, or even a living person that didn't acknowledge you and was in fact many miles away at the time you saw them, phantasms of the living. There's actually precedent for so much of this stuff that we don't think of today, because it all happened at the end of the 19th century, and they hide those secrets in books. And yeah, I'm
Yes.
being kind of, you know, so phantasms of the living was a huge, huge thing. Or crisis apparitions fascinate me. The idea
Yes.
that somebody on the point of death appears to a loved one, primarily their mother, but that is a thing that again is as old as the hills, and stories like that are touted these days as if they're something new. And although they're strange, there is a long, long precedent for things like that. I think one of the stranger things that was ever reported to me was a Mothman type creature, um, that was seen not in Point Pleasant, but in the suburbs of Chicago, in the middle of a residential neighborhood. The classic bat wings, the glowing red eyes,
Wow.
a loud piercing shriek. And that case originally crossed my fellow investigator and author's desk, Tobias. And I interviewed that witness, found them very credible. And how does this happen in the middle of a suburban neighborhood, and nobody else experiences it or notices this flying bat-winged red-eyed thing? Truly, truly strange.
That is truly strange. Although I've seen some of the residential neighborhoods of Chicago, some of them that wouldn't be so odd.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so.
But I've I do love Chicago, and I love traveling there. But some areas are a little bit interesting.
Oh, for sure. Rockford, Tinker's Swiss Cottage is a great place. A wonderful historic location, and the area surrounding that has a lot of very interesting stories too.
And what was the name of it?
Tinker's Swiss Cottage in Rockford.
I am going to write that down and do some research on that. I love finding new places to study.
Oh, that's definitely a place that's well worth a visit, for the history and for the ghosts.
I like both. So I'm actually going to Ireland next year, and I'm very excited about that
Oh, wonderful
to
country.
to investigate. But where is you've been to you've been to Ronnie's hospitals, you've been to so many places.
Yeah.
Have you been to places in Ohio?
No, Ohio is not well known to me, and I know there are a plethora of haunted locations there. I just have not made it out there.
Well, I have a friend who has she owns a haunted location, and it's probably, I know you hear this a lot, but it's probably the most interactive haunting that I've experienced, and it was pretty cool.
Oh,
So
what is it, a public location or
it
a private
is.
residence?
No, it's a public location. It's called the Old Paulding Jail
Okay.
in Paulding, Ohio. It's about 20 minutes out of Fort Wayne Airport.
Mm,
So it's really easy to get to, and it is public. And she would, I'm sure, welcome you with open arms to come and experience it. We, she was featured on Portals to Hell, and they had me on,
mm,
but it's the most wonderful. wonderful location because there are former sheriffs that are there. There are former inmates who are there. There's it's just cool. And I think that when you get something that's got very personal interaction,
Yeah.
that it's kind of cool. And they know. I mean, she bought that jail as it was going to auction. It was going to probably be torn down. And I think that it's really neat when history can be saved like that. And the spirits that are there know that she did that because they got really mad at me one day and I told them that I was there to do a show to support her. And, you know, what would they do if blah, blah, blah. Anyway, they got mad. I got mad. It was an interesting interaction. And
Yeah.
it was, we came to a really nice understanding. And so the relationship with them has been good when I've been able to be there since then. But it was a trip.
I'm glad
It
to
was
hear it. I think keeping history alive is one of the nicest things about the paranormal field.
it is. And when somebody loves their location, like Robin,
Oh
you
yeah,
know, when somebody genuinely loves their location and they care for it and they want to share it with people and but they're very particular about taking care of their spirits too.
yeah,
I know you see that in a lot of places where you go. I don't have that many friends who own locations. It's like Shelly and Ronnie and
yeah.
and Robin. And it's to me that is such a special human that cares enough about A, history, B, their community, and C, the spirits that still reside. They kind of feel a kinship.
I think that
And
there, yeah, don't you find that there are situations where it seems like they've found ways to kind of mutually coexist,
mhm,
sometimes quite happily.
yeah.
Mm.
And you know that particular location, just that relationship just keeps evolving in a positive way. It's There's so much that happens there. It's really fascinating.
Oh, good. I
Yeah,
always like to tell people, come for the ghost, stay for the history. Because
exactly.
I've always believed that ghosts really are just history given form and voice. They are us, and ultimately we're all history waiting to happen.
We are.
Um, and so I think that that window into those who came before us, um, they had very similar hopes, dreams, fears, anxieties. The more things change, the more they stay the same, as the old saying goes. I
And
think,
that is true.
mhm, yeah, absolutely is,
Yeah.
and I find that kind of comforting. Um, to tell you the truth.
Well, the human experience, no matter what era you're in, is still living, loving, dying. I mean, it's universal. It's what
It is
happens within those times that varies,
right.
but as a rule, we're not that different.
No, I think that that's absolutely correct. Deep down, we're not that different. Some of us have different priorities. I think some people are more spiritually advanced than others. Some of us still have, I know I certainly do, have many lessons to learn, where others seem to be further along that path. But yeah, we're all essentially on a very similar journey.
Well, and it's never boring. Well, you may think it's boring, but then there's a plot twist. Yeah. And there you are.
Yeah, this season of my life is really out of control. I can't. I hope things are quieter next season, or 2025, as I'm calling it.
Well, I will tell you that that would be a nice thing. I
It
am
would.
I am just ready for a little um a little peace, a little peace and camaraderie maybe, and people to just be like nice to each other. I hope that we find a way to do that. And I'm just so excited about being able to investigate places that I've never seen and meet people I've never known and find spirits that I've never chatted with. Just the little things.
It's
But,
not a bad aspiration to have, Kat.
well, it's the one I've got. So that's a good thing. But,
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I'd like a little piece as well. I think though I'm going to keep my sights low. I'd like a little piece of Christmas cake next week. That's like
yes.
a little more realistic, and
Well,
then
a
maybe
little,
another one afterwards.
another one afterwards.
Yeah.
But, well, I like Christmas trifle.
Oh,
And
trifle. Now you're talking my
I,
language.
yes. Oh my gosh. When we were in Scotland, I don't know if this is a thing in England, but the sticky pudding,
Toffee
sticky
pudding,
toffee
usually.
pudding,
Yeah, it is
is
a thing
that,
in England. It
oh my
is.
gosh. That should be universal. It should be universal. That was brilliant.
Yeah, you'll get no argument from me.
Have you investigated in the UK?
Yeah, I started out in the mid '90s, in fact, investigating in the UK, and I brought that passion for all things ghostly to the US when I emigrated here.
What brought you here?
Uh, the glib answer is I think it was a 747, but
Yeah, that's so bad.
in all seriousness, I worked for a big IT company, and I had an IT job out here in Colorado, and I liked it enough that I ended up settling down and became a dual citizen and have not been evicted yet.
Well, you're doing something right.
Hopefully so.
Yeah.
Hopefully so.
I hope that it stays that way. Have you been to Scotland?
Despite the fact that my sisters lived there for a long time, I've only been once to the border, to the Scottish border, and that was, of course, to investigate a haunted castle, Kielder Castle. But I would love to spend some more time in Scotland.
Well, I will recommend it. It's the first time I went was with a really bad tour company. The second time I went was because of the bad tour. A
Hmm.
group of us as friends came together and we went and we spent about 3 weeks over there. And we
Yeah.
went from Edinburgh up above Inverness, and it was brilliant.
Oh,
We,
good.
Castle Menzies and all these other cool places. But
Hmm.
um, I think you would get a real kick out of that because the spirits there are very interactive too.
Hmm.
And I thought it was cool. What was it like, the place that you investigated?
I mean, it was a castle. How could you not love it?
I know,
Um,
right?
but it was right on the borderland. It had some very interesting history, and the piece to resistance for us was uh, hearing the sound very clearly of shuffling footsteps in a completely empty hallway, which I think was entirely residual. But I do love
Sure,
residual
but
phenomena.
cool. I do
Yeah,
too.
I think that they're regarded as not being kind of, I hate to say the word, but like sexy enough. Oh, that's just residual, but you're getting a
Residual is cool.
yeah, you're getting a window into the past,
Yes.
having been at Gettysburg and heard
Oh,
cannon fire on the battlefield.
yes.
Uh, you know, it's just an incredible thing if you think that you are really hearing the echoes of history, the after echoes of history. So I love that about Kielder Castle. I really, really did. I only had one night there, so it was a whistle stop tour, but I would go back in a heartbeat, and I would recommend it to anybody that is in the vicinity.
Absolutely. It's to me, it's fascinating because Gettysburg rocks my world too.
Mm,
But I just don't, I can't emphasize enough how these places are free to go to as a rule. If you're on a
yeah,
battlefield, there's some places that are going to charge admission. I mean, but it's such an amazing honor to be able to investigate an historic place and actually have interaction. It's such a gift. I think it's a gift.
It is. I mean, although the Park Service severely frowns upon that at Gettysburg, and I understand why.
That's true. I don't
Um,
investigate on the battlefield in
mm,
Gettysburg. That's just,
yeah,
it's just like you can't do it on Culloden in Scotland. If you're seen investigating on Culloden, you'll be removed.
I feel like there are certain locations where you need to be there simply to appreciate the gravity of it. I mean,
Yes.
the example I always use is when I visited the crash site for United Flight 93 in
Yes.
Pennsylvania.
Oh,
And I was on a 10-day paranormal themed road trip for a book. And not for one moment did it ever cross my mind that I would take out a voice recorder or do anything. Those
yes.
kind of places are sacred.
Yes.
And the whole point is to go there and just appreciate, number one, the sacrifice of the individuals involved. And number two, just they have so much to teach us,
Yes.
so much meaning to impart. It would cheapen it enormously if you were
I
to do
agree.
that there.
I do agree. I don't mind the experiences. I mean, in Gettysburg, I've had experiences,
Mm,
and I've had them. The very first night I was there, the first time I was at um, the bridge,
Sachs
Sachs
Covered
Bridge,
Bridge.
and it was amazing because there were like military maneuvers going on in the grass next to me. And at first I thought that there was a stand of trees over there where there was nothing. And I thought, well, that's an odd place for trees. And I turned around to say something to the person that had, taken me out there. And when I turned back around, the trees were gone. And I'm like, there were just trees there. Well, they were soldiers. It was a group of soldiers. That's apparently not an uncommon thing there.
Mm,
And then while we were talking, um, or while they were talking, I was just looking back trying to figure out what had happened. And I kept seeing what I thought were bunnies, popping up,
yeah.
and they were coming closer. And I was just kind of like, are those bunnies dangerous? I mean, are we going to get bitten? Or they're like, those are not bunnies. And they weren't. There were no bunnies. And I was like, well, what is that? And they said, usually that's sentries. They're,
Mm,
spies. And I mean, if they had told me that before I went there, I probably would not have believed them. And yet I saw it,
mm.
and I wasn't, I wasn't, I didn't have any equipment. I wasn't doing anything because I don't think you should investigate things like that. But to experience it was really surprising.
Yeah, I imagine it would be.
I had no idea that that was a thing. And I just blew me away. And there were a ton of people out there too. So,
Always popular, especially if you're out there during the bash.
oh, the bash is so cool though. I I was glad to be back this year. So, speaking of which, you've done you've have you done a book on Fort Mifflin?
I did. It was
I
called The
thought so.
Ghost That Saved America.
Yes. I love that place. I haven't been there yet, but I love everything I know about it. What did you find when you were there?
Um, so I got to spend several days and nights there. And the nice thing about Fort Mifflin, or I should say the surprising thing about Fort Mifflin, is it's quite like a layer cake in that you expect to go there, and because of its reputation, its importance in history, you expect to encounter redcoats and Continentals, members of the Continental Army, and there's so much more than that. I mean, if you look at Fort Mifflin's history, it was used to imprison prisoners of war under very harsh conditions during the Civil War. It was active right up through the Vietnam War, in fact.
I didn't know
So,
that.
yeah, and there are quite a lot of ancillary hauntings at Fort Mifflin that do not connect to the War of Independence. And what's interesting is that they seem to be unaware of one another, as though they're stacked on top, layered, uh,
Yeah.
but they're not interacting, which I've always found that idea fascinating. If you have ghosts from multiple different eras, I don't know if you watch the TV show Ghosts, which it's a
Mhm.
great, very entertaining show. But the idea of all these ghosts in one location from different times being a kind of dysfunctional family, you know.
Yes.
I always wondered, can they do that? Can somebody from, say, 1863 communicate with someone from 1776? And I don't know the answer, but it seems that at Fort Mifflin they can't. They're unaware of one another, but do seem to be aware of the living investigators and willing to interact with them.
How did they interact?
So EVPs, of course, physical stuff, touches. One of the coolest moments of that trip was being inside the magazine for casemates and hearing and recording the tread of footsteps outside that sounded just like a sentry making their rounds, which would have been the case when the casemates were used as prisons. Sentries would have patrolled back and forth outside, just keeping an eye on the prisoners. And to have heard that and caught the sound on recording is, again, that window into the past that is so cool.
It is so cool. You know, people that watch the shows, and I love not slamming anybody in the paranormal field.
Mm-hmm.
The shows raise awareness, they get attention, they draw attention to locations. And do I wish some people might tone down a bit because, you know, people need to understand that you need to respect these places? Yes, sometimes I do, but you know what? Everybody does them, does themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
I just think that it's so surprising for people that have not done this. Like if you're in town and you go to an event, Lori mentioned Moon River Brewery
Mm.
in Savannah, which she was meaning for you to check it out, but they're closed. But there's a place called the Sorrel Weed House that she and I met to go investigate one year, and I had done a walking tour through it on a previous trip and was really blown away. And so when we went to do an investigation there, it turned out to not be the house that was so active, but the carriage house that time.
Oh.
So you don't know when you go into places what you're going to find, but or who's going to interact with you, because the activity is different. And I think that if it's an intelligent haunting, then it's a whole different experience than like stone tape theory or whatever. But I think that when people get a chance to go someplace that they've seen on TV,
Yeah.
What you do, what other shows do, what different people do, it raises the awareness of the history, and people learn from that. And then it also leads them to go and support some of these locations like Fort Mifflin.
Mm.
That's some place that is doing a fundraiser soon. I think it's soon. I don't think it's already happened. But the National Park Service doesn't really fully support all of these places, do they?
Not for Mifflin, certainly.
No.
And you look at its place in our national history. It's no exaggeration to say, well, they call it the fort that saved America.
Yes.
It's absolutely crucial. Kat, I know that we've been on for an hour and 20 minutes. I'm having a great time. Is it possible I could take 2 minutes to let out my dog? Um,
Absolutely.
I will be right back.
And I will keep people talking. So everybody, I know that the different topics that we're covering, the different locations, but Fort Mifflin, if you can get there, check them out on Facebook. It is one of the best locations, and I love forts. I am on the Gulf Coast a lot, and my town has the place Fort Morgan, and it's very active. I know that when I don't remember what the show was called. Somebody help me out. The one with Adam and Amy and Chip, they were doing a show together, and I just blanked the name. but they were down there at Fort Morgan, and they were getting a lot of walking around and stuff. And that is one of the coolest places. I took my friend Lori there, and we didn't get very much. It was hotter than blazes, too. I thought she was going to fall out on me. Thought I was going to fall out, and I'm used to it. But the only thing we got, we walked in, and that's where I trained with K2s and stuff. My very first K2 conversation was there. And so Lori actually got a blip on a K2 when we came around a corner. It was like we surprised someone. And that was the only thing we got in the whole area where I had that whole conversation. But it was still something that I was like, oh, well, look, they're here. So if you get it, thank you. Kindred Spirits. That was the name of the show that was there. And I am so sorry. Um, you know, and since we're doing this, shout out to Chip Coffee, because love and healing and blessings on you, because he has been so sick, guys. Um, always care about this man. He's a pretty cool guy. But I just think that it's neat when you get something that the first time I did this, it was my first time to ever even hold a K2, and I ran out of questions. I ran out of conversation. And when I said, I'm so sorry, I don't have anything else. And it just, my K2 went crazy. And I was like, oh, I'll think of something, you know. So I was just talking, Richard, about my experience at Fort Morgan down in South Alabama, and the importance of these different, because, I was took my kids to Fort Morgan one day, and it's a Civil War fort. Actually, it's before the Civil War. But I turned around, and there was a Panzer tank coming out of the woods at me. And I was like, oh my gosh, where do I go? Because that was unexpected.
Yeah.
But that was actually, they were doing reenactments from different periods of the fort's usage. And that was one of them. It was at Guards Mobile Bay.
The fort, not a World War II era Panzer.
Yes, the fort guards that, but it was also active during the World Wars because of submarine action.
Okay.
But boy, did that blow my mind.
Yeah, it's not what I would expect to see coming at me out of the woods either.
No. I didn't even know we had action there during that period. So a Panzer tank was just like, oh my God, there's a lunatic out here.
You did not see that coming.
No. Well, I did eventually. Really up close and personal. But it was a hoot. Not something I want to re-experience.
No, you wouldn't care to repeat.
Yeah. But, well, I want to talk about this, your new book, In Search of Demons. What brought that topic to you?
Well, number one, it's a subject I find perennially fascinating, but frankly, I just got sick and tired of the sheer overload of alleged demonic activity in this field. I think that it's one of the most misused, overused words. When I began investigating claims of the paranormal in the mid-90s in the UK, there were no claims of demonic cases going around. And when I relocated to the States in 1999, there really weren't that many either. Most of the ones there were on the East Coast. And of course, I think we have the Warrens to attribute that to.
Yes.
And indeed, most demonic cases do seem to be reported from the East Coast, which makes sense. As my friend Jeff Belanger pointed out, you have that Puritan kind of history and that streak which still runs through parts of the East Coast. But all of a sudden, in around about 2008, 2009, certain television shows started not only encountering demons, but finding them every week.
Everywhere.
And apparently this was good for ratings, because then certain other shows started finding them everywhere too. And it became this race to the bottom, which continues to this day. Now that paranormal television is a shadow of its former self, the demonic claims continue apace on YouTube and TikTok and other social media platforms. And I just found it very hard to believe that there were so many genuine, even if you believe in demons, and I wasn't sure that I did or did not. But
Right.
even if you believe in them, there is no way there were that many genuine cases. So I wanted to find out how much evidence is there for the reality or non-reality of demons. And that was the book I approached my publisher with, Llewellyn Worldwide, and I said, I want to follow this path. I want to go on a trail I want to talk to exorcists, to priests. I want to talk to medical doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists. I want to talk about possession with people that have, supposedly exorcised. And I want to I want to cast a very wide net.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to ghost hunters. Jason Hawes gave me the benefit of his expertise, for example. I talked to a world-class stage illusionist about how you might go about faking a possession, so that could you pull that off with his skills in front of a crowd? Could you make someone levitate? Those kind of things. And the impetus was just to want to know how much truth or reality there is to this claim that demons appear to be everywhere.
What did you find? Without giving away the whole book.
Well, I will say that if you believe in demons, this book won't convince you that they're not real. And if you don't believe in demons, it won't convince you that they are real. And that was never my intent. What I wanted to do was gather the evidence and lay it out for the reader to make a case and let them draw their own conclusions. And I finished the book certainly not convinced that demons exist. And I've been to what many claim to be the most demonically infested locations in the US, or some of them. But by the same token, I'm still open to being convinced that they're real. I do think there seems to be a degree of, if demons are real, then how much power they have over you relates to how much power you give them by being afraid of them.
Mm-hmm.
I was fascinated by this notion that it's extremely, extremely rare to find claims of a non-believer being possessed. So the best defense against demonic possession seems to be an atheist, which is fascinating to me. How much
You
of
wouldn't
this
think
is
that would be protection, right?
how much of this is a psychological phenomenon versus how much of this is an objective thing that actually happens. And I'm very aware that there are many people, half the world's population, that wholeheartedly have demons as part of their belief system, and I certainly respect their right to believe that. But by the same token, I find it very hard to believe that a minion of Satan, the Prince of Darkness, is going to spend his time lurking in a kitchen in Arkansas. Do they not have better things to do with their time, if that makes sense?
Well, I think that relevant to that, to why they're in Arkansas or wherever,
Yeah.
my my
And by the way,
experience.
Kat, that was no disrespect to Arkansas. It was
Oh
literally the
no, I
first
know.
state I pulled out of my head.
I don't think anybody would. I mean, we have people
Mhm.
like that here,
Sure.
so it happens here. But what gets me is that the premise that I have grown up with is that, almost like with Job, okay, it's like a challenge kind of a thing. So people of faith who believe that there is a battle between good and evil,
hmm
and whatever, the stronger the faith, the more of the challenge, I think, is the way it's presented.
I mean, that would
And
make sense because one of the cases that was made to me was that the devil would have no value in the soul of an atheist. The devil's objective. One thing I covered also in this book was several of the more interesting historical cases of possession, such as the Erling, Iowa
mhm,
exorcism, and it was presented that the devil values taking away a Christian soul from God and having it for his own. So you
kind
have
of a
this
challenge.
yeah, but this kind of battleground for souls where Satan is keeping score, which it certainly has its own inherent logic if you look at it in that way. that the soul of an atheist has no value to the devil because you're not taking it away from God. It was never, promised to God in the first place, as it were.
Like not an in your face move.
Exactly, yeah. Which I thought was an interesting concept. I never considered that.
Well, it is different. I mean, that's not the way things would be presented very often.
No, and I really did try and cover this from 360 degrees. Um, it just kind of fascinates me that demons have been with us throughout all of human history in one form or another.
Yeah.
Going by different names, of course, different cultures have called them different things, but this concept of non-human entities that have never walked the earth uh, as one of us, that are responsible for misfortunes in human lives, plagues, blights, the death of a loved one, could all be pinned at the door of demons. That's something that is a belief that is thousands of years old.
Literally.
Literally, yeah. Uh, Going back to Babylon, Samaria, uh, for as long as we have any kind of recorded information, humans have believed in this, and it makes absolute sense. When I was a boy, and I would hear thunder, I'd be terrified in a thunderstorm. My mom used to say, "Oh, don't be scared, Richard. God's just moving the furniture around." And I look back now and I thought that what a wonderful thing that is, because it's a great frame of reference a 5-year-old can understand, right? I know what it sounds like when furniture is moved around upstairs in my house. If somebody moves something to vacuum. So if I hear these loud rumbles going on in the middle of a thunderstorm, yeah, I absolutely can buy
Yeah.
that God is moving the furniture around. It makes sense. And by the same token, Kat, I think demons have been a black box historically where humans could take all of the things that we didn't understand and we could
Yes.
shove it in that black box and have an explanation. Why did my 6-month-old healthy child die? Why did my horse suddenly go lame? Why did my animal start giving curdled milk? Why is there a famine? Why was there a flood? Why was there a lightning strike which burned down my barn? Demons. Far easier to believe that, far safer, and I hate to say it, but more psychologically reassuring to believe that than to think bad
Random.
things sometimes just happen randomly to people.
Random is scary.
Random is terrifying. The
Demons are
idea
scary too.
But the
But
difference, but there's a defense against demons, and that's the
yes.
thing. The
Yes.
idea, you go to the church, especially the Catholic Church, and this idea that, hey, we can protect you. We have exorcists, we have exorcisms, we are the warriors, against the darkness. Whereas there is no equivalent for bad things just happening randomly to good people, right? So, yeah, there might be demons, but you watch a movie like The Exorcist, which, by the way, is one of my favorite movies.
I
It's
have never seen it.
it is terrific and has lost none of its ability to shock and to scare today. But it is the greatest. I describe that as the Top Gun of the Catholic Church. And what I mean by that is when the first Top Gun movie came out in, I believe, 1986,
Mhm.
US Navy recruiting went through the roof, right?
Right.
When The Exorcist was released, belief in the Catholic Church, interest in Catholicism skyrocketed for the same reason. You have this story of heroic priests literally going toe to toe with the devil and winning, albeit at great cost. So the priests are kind of the superheroes in this story, and it's a narrative that the church has done very well with. Don't worry, we got this. We will protect you. We will defend you. And there are individuals, self-described demonologists today,
Yes.
some of whom have quite a pedigree of, they've studied, they've put in their time, and they've done the work. And then there are others that have the equivalent of a certificate you can download from the internet after paying $99, and they will come in and tackle demons for you. Um, I find that there is an ugly side to the way that demons are handled in the paranormal field right now,
100%.
and nobody really seemed to be willing to address it.
Well, I had I had an investigation with my team, the
Mm,
team I was with at that time, and it was a family home, and they were
right.
having bizarre behavior.
Hmm.
We went, we saged, we you know saged everywhere.
Yeah,
and it was affecting a child, which is why it was a priority.
of course.
So finished and left, and there's a group it's like they're all over the country, and they came in to because there was some more activity. They came into that home and did an exorcism on a 6-year old, their version of an exorcism. And I I was stunned because
Yeah,
there wasn't anything like that in that house. And it was just like unbelievable to me that there were people who did not have training because the group, that organization, or however you want to phrase it, does not train.
hmm
Okay. And it blew me away that I felt like that was so irresponsible and dangerous. And
absolutely.
a 6-year old, seriously, that was just afraid. It just
Yeah,
drives me crazy
it's
that these
unethical.
people go around doing this stuff and with, I mean, willy nilly, just willy nilly, willy
The
nilly. It was ridiculous.
before authorizing an exorcism, the Catholic Church requires that a psychological
Yeah,
evaluation by a trained, licensed mental
psychologist.
health professional be
Yeah,
performed, which is absolutely appropriate. And I gathered some interesting perspectives on exorcism. One which really surprised me came from somebody who said, I think that if an exorcism wouldn't hurt, try an exorcism. That being said, the word exorcism covers, a fairly broad spectrum,
hmm,
and it's important to remember that more people die of exorcisms. If you look at, the case of Annalise Michel,
yes.
um,
Oh my gosh,
that
yes.
that poor young woman was essentially starved to death,
Yep.
and tortured is the appropriate word. Now, to me, it doesn't matter that the individuals involved, the priests and her parents, had nothing but the best motives. They genuinely believed their daughter was possessed and tormented by dark and evil spirits. Um, but she was denied the health care that she needed,
Yep.
and active neglect is what killed that poor woman.
Yes, it is.
Um, so exorcism is not something I think that should be undertaken lightly. That being said, it certainly has its place. And
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to agree with you that there are times and places for things, but if somebody is dying as a result of what you're doing,
Mhm.
stop.
Most definitely, and with a 6-year-old, I mean, I shudder to think what that would look like, and I shudder to think why parents would authorize it, um, would
Yes.
allow that.
Well, I certainly don't understand it, and I was so stunned, and I just it's endangerment,
I mean, I don't
in
know
my
the
opinion.
details of what happened, but
Well,
certainly I could
it's,
see it being
it's
harmful.
yeah. I mean, because psychologically it is anyway.
Yes.
So anyway, I'm on my high horse. I'm
Oh
sorry.
yeah, and I'm very comfortable being on my high horse when it comes to this because when active harm is being done, I think it does need to be addressed. Um,
Yeah.
so I do believe that there are individuals out there that have put in the time, that have studied, that
Hmm.
are acting genuinely from what they believe to be the best interests of their clients. Um, and it doesn't matter that they have religious beliefs that are different from mine. I respect that they have the best interests of people at heart.
Yeah.
On the flip side, there is a cottage industry of individuals, I think, that are doing it for self-aggrandizement, for their own ego, maybe
Yes.
doing it for financial gain. Um, but these are people I think that I would be very hesitant to allow within 100 miles of any case I was involved with.
Without a
So
doubt.
doing your due diligence, I think, is absolutely key.
Well, it is. And I don't know. That left such a bad taste in my mouth.
Mm,
And I just didn't care for that.
Totally understandable.
But anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
I am, I just think that, the actual concept of how you approach this book, you had so much ground to cover.
And there was no way I could actually cover it in the space available. Um, the book was contracted to be around 65,000 words. It came in at 76, I think it was. So easily 10,000, 13,000 words over budget, as it were. And to their credit, the publishers did not blink. They did not
Oh,
insist on any
that's
cuts.
nice.
Um, the biggest failure of the book, in my mind, as the author, is that it's very Western Judeo Christian centric. And what I mean by that is, I didn't have the budget, frankly, the opportunity to travel to other parts of the world I would like to have covered. I'd like to see how exorcism is handled in Africa, and places, where it's performed a little bit more often than it is here in the West. So I'd like to revisit that subject further down the line, looking at how other cultures are handling demons and exorcism today. That's my big self critique of In Search of Demons. But for
Well,
its flaws, I'm very, very proud of the book.
you should be. I feel like it's a tough topic to handle.
Mm.
And the fact that you went at that is, I think it's pretty cool because there's not really enough conversation, certainly not in the paranormal field. Um, there's not enough conversation about how to ascertain, why do you think this is demonic? Why do
Yeah,
you think that there is something that needs to be done this extreme to handle this? I think that I like the input that you got to to address this. Um, all respected individuals,
thank you.
and
I mean, you've worked, I assume, Kat, aggressive human hauntings. One thing that I could never satisfactorily answer was, how do you tell if you are dealing with a belligerent human spirit versus a demon? If we come down to scratches and pushes and shoves and physical violence, I have news for everyone. As a
yeah,
paramedic, I have patients that do that to me every week. And
yeah,
they are combative for various reasons, sometimes psychological, sometimes they're just extremely angry or enraged or grieving or whatever it may be. So, how do we know that that's not what we're dealing with in cases where people are getting scratched? And I think that we as a field are far too quick to leap to, it's a demonic entity because somebody got scratched,
I agree.
when it's it's not even the most likely explanation. I find it far more credible to believe that you have an aggressive spirit haunting your home or wherever your location is than you have this thing from the pit. Um, because if demons are as powerful as the Bible says, they are capable of far more than just scratching you, right? If you truly have an up close and personal encounter with one, that would be like being thrown into the tiger enclosure.
Yes, and I don't choose to do that.
Quite right.
you know, I I just think that the whole um, the whole concept. Do I believe that? Yes, I do believe there are there.
Hmm.
Is it something that I think is a frequent occurrence? No, I don't. And if nothing else, just because of the experience I had, you know, we left there and things were calm and mellow. And, there wasn't a child that was doing anything that was horrible. She had activity in her room, but I don't believe that she was the cause of it, you know. But it was just so shady. I felt like it was shady to go out and do stuff like that. So, do I think that there are real issues? I agree with you. Yeah, I do. I do think there can be. But I also think that if you go looking for the drama that people try to turn demonic issues into
Hmm.
for self-aggrandizement, it's really pretty sad.
Well, and you know, we have a saying in medicine that if you consult a surgeon, the answer is probably going to be surgery.
Yes,
And by
I
the same
agree.
token, you know, when you're a hammer, every problem is a nail, right?
Yeah.
So no disrespect to surgeons or hammers or surgeons with hammers, but but what I'm saying is that we're all kind of comfortable with our own frame of reference. So if somebody delves into this field of demonology, how much more likely are they then to interpret so much as being demonic in nature? That's a question
Yes.
that they should be asking of themselves first and foremost.
Well, and especially if the idea that you're going to fight a demon,
Mm-hmm.
and that's your adrenaline rush to keep your life interesting,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I gotta wonder who's drawing the demons with that.
Yeah, yeah, or whether you are simply inventing something that isn't there again for your
Yeah.
own gratification. Um, if demons truly exist, and again, I'm open to the possibility that they may, um, I think that there should be no doubt as to their presence, that you should be on a case and it would be extremely clear that that's what is being dealt with and encountered.
Well,
Um,
I think that they enjoy making it very clear, from what I understand.
I mean, that has a logic to it, that argument, and I wouldn't find that hard to believe. Um, so why then though do we see every case, or it seems like every case? One of
Yeah.
my bugbears is logging on to YouTube and seeing videos with tens, if not hundreds of thousands of views. The thumbnails are all the same.
Yeah.
I survived Night of Hell and Demon Portal House, you know,
Yeah.
and it's a case of I don't think that's what you encountered. Number one, if you really believe in this, if you really believe in the demonic, why would you do that? Why?
Yeah.
If they're as dangerous and life threatening as you say, you're really going to put yourself in front of
And
that level
challenge
of
it.
threat. Yeah,
And
and
challenge
challenge it
it.
and provoke it for views, for money. You should question your own sanity if you're really willing to do that. But I think it's a form of modern day storytelling. And I do think that
Yeah.
unfortunately, some creators are not able to get the level of popularity and income that they want without going down the demon road. Um, Ghosts just weren't scary enough, were they? That's really what it comes down to.
Well,
And we now, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, they can be if you go into the house and provoke them the way that people try to provoke demons.
Mhm.
Or, I mean, not only are you going to investigate where you think there are demons, you're pissing them off.
Right.
I
It
mean,
really is like poking the
yeah,
bear.
yes.
Um, but what's also interesting
Excuse
is
my French. I mean, that
that's
was
okay,
not.
she'll show. But I interviewed Patty Negri, and she talked about a case that she was involved with that fascinated me. Um, you know, as a medium, Patty's done quite a few cases, and she talked about a case where she was dealing with a very flamboyant spirit that enjoyed acting and play acting. And
Hmm.
essentially, when a group of filmmakers that asked her to be involved with a project went to a haunted location um, and started throwing the demon word around, the flamboyant, disgruntled, get these kids out of my house spirit said, all right, you want a demon? I shall give you a demon, and decided to play act the part,
Oh
which
my goodness.
again I can find that credible. You
I
know,
can.
what's it going to take to get you out of my house? A few scratches and the smell of brimstone coming right up. You know, a true demon would have gone through that crowd like a knife through butter, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. And I will say that I find Patty Negri to be very credible. I've investigated with her and I agree. And I can just picture that moment in her
Yeah.
experience.
And you know, Patty was one of the believers. She was the one that said that she had encountered two
Mhm.
locations she considered to be demonic in her career.
Mhm.
One was the Black Dahlia house,
Yeah.
scene of the infamous murder, of course, of Elizabeth Short, and the other was the Hotel Cecil in Los Angeles. Um, and she felt very strongly that those two cases were demonic. And on the flip side, hundreds of others were not. So, I will say this, that if demons do exist, if demonic hauntings are real, they have to be incredibly rare, the genuine ones. I would find that much easier to believe than you can get, oh, let's say 8 episodes per season for 20 seasons of a show where you find one every other week.
I would agree with that.
Naming no names.
Don't need to. But I will say that I I had to stop watching that because of the redundancy. And while it gets attention, it gets stale. And I think that paranormal investigators that are active in the field, who are doing investigations, helping people, with home issues, whatever, um, I don't do residentials anymore. Mainly, I just go and investigate places that I find interesting and that I know the history of. But the world's a little bit different from when I used to do residentials. I'm not comfortable going into homes of people I don't know anymore. But it's just really, you get the energy that you put out a
Yeah,
lot.
absolutely.
And if you're having negative experiences everywhere you're going, then you might should look at the attitude that you're bringing into those environments.
I think
Because
there's a huge degree, and I completely agree with you, Kat. I think there's a huge degree of you get back what you put in this field. And if you go looking for the darkness and you go calling it out, there's a chance that you'll find it, you
it's
know?
just out there waiting sometimes.
Yeah, if you believe that like attracts like. But I mean, I also think it's true that, if you go to a new town, somebody can direct you to the parts of town that most people don't really want to go to. And
Mhm.
if you want to know where to go to find trouble, you can certainly find it, and you can go drum it up with minimal effort, and
Yep.
then don't come crying when you get hurt. You
There's
know,
that.
why would that law not apply in the paranormal field?
It does.
Hmm.
It completely does. I'm a firm believer in you get back what you put out. That's a great way that you put that. I agree with that in every walk of life, really. Every so often you'll run into a putz, but not as often as you would think.
Yeah,
But oh my goodness,
we are about at time, aren't we?
we are. I have enjoyed you so much. This is a great conversation. Thank you.
That was my pleasure.
But well, why don't you go ahead and tell people where they can find you and what you've got going on?
Absolutely. So you can find me online at richardestep.net. You can also find me across various social media. On Twitter, I'm estepr. On Instagram, estep.richard. Facebook, Richard Estep Author. And Estep Writes on TikTok, if that's still going to be a thing after January. And Blue Sky. Um, and in terms of what I've got going on, I just completed a co-authored book on the Mothman phenomenon, and I'm wrapping up a book on Great Hauntings, which should be out next year. Then I turn my attention to some location-based books, also a book on cryptids that I can't say too much about just yet.
All cryptids.
Maybe.
I love cryptids. But well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I've enjoyed you immensely.
Thank you. It's a
So,
pleasure.
and for everyone listening, thank y'all too. Y'all are the reason that we do these shows. And you will be able to catch this um, almost immediately on Dark Realm TV on Roku. And we will be up on Fire Stick in probably another week or so. And Dark Realm TV is a subscription channel, but you know what? It is horror. It is paranormal. It is all the fun things. I can't believe I said horror was fun things, but some people find it that way. But go check it out because a lot of my friends are on there with me, and there's not a bad show there. So come join us. And again, Richard, thank you so much. And I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you. I hope so. Have wonderful holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy Festivus for the rest of us, whichever you
Right back
celebrate.
Right back to you. Good night.
Good night. Take care.
You too.